Hello, this is Confabulation, and I am Beverly Thomas. My pronouns are she and her. Joining me today is David. And David, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is David. I'm the legal advocate at our sister's house, and my pronouns are he and him.
And we are from Our Sister's House, a domestic violence organization that provides advocacy and education for victims and survivors of domestic violence. If you or anyone that you know is experiencing domestic violence, you can call our hotline at 253-383-4275 or visit our website at oursistershouse.com. And an announcement for today is our sister's house will be partnering with Me Central this year for our annual All a Day event. Listen and watch out on our social media platforms for more details. Today, our topic is grooming and abuse. So, what is grooming? According to National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, grooming is when someone builds a relationship, trust, and emotional connection with a child or young person so they can manipulate, exploit, and abuse them. Number two, a groomer can be anybody, no matter their age, gender, or race. Grooming can take place over a short period or a long period of time, from weeks to years. Groomers may also build a relationship with the young person's family or friends to make them seem trustworthy or authoritative.
Yeah, and to that point, I have worked with CSE, sexual trafficking and exploitation. And when I was doing one of the trainings, there was actually a topic where we spoke about to my surprise, that they even, one way they get young boys by grooming them, they do it online through the online chats or, just building trust by, playing a video game like Rainbow Six Siege. And this is not to say that all video games are bad, but it's,
Mhm.
just to be aware that these things are happening, and it is important, who your child, speaks to, and no matter what their gender is. Yeah, people will try to exploit that, through those avenues of trust. I can trust this person because they're my teammate on Rainbow Six Siege. I can trust this person because they're really good at this game and they're funny or whatever. So, I can trust this person. And oftentimes they take advantage of somewhere that the child is lacking support in the family. Doesn't mean that they don't have a good family, but there might be something lacking in the family and some type of support that, that the parents or brothers or sisters or somebody in the family isn't giving to the child or feels like isn't giving to the child, and they exploit those through those avenues. And that's how they get, some of the kids, especially on these video games that are, sometimes not regulated when it comes to who they talk to or who they interact with.
Right, David, and sometimes, groomers seek out relationships with children and young people. And to your point, um, that young person is often more vulnerable. So once the perpetrator singles out their victim, they give them special attention. So, I'm going to step away just for a few minutes from the statistics, and I'm going to give you I'm going to talk about a reality, a real life experience. So, I can remember I was 6 years old, and I will not to protect the person because I don't think that's important, but it was a family member. So, um, what he started off doing was tickling me. And, little kids like to laugh, right?
Mhm.
So he always tickled, and I noticed, well, I look back at it now and I look back at it when I got older, he always had me or my female cousins or siblings on his lap and bouncing you around and you're laughing and oh here comes so and so and he makes me laugh, but he gained our confidence, our he gained our trust, and he was actually a pervert, and so he was crossing boundaries, but rewarding, like rewarding with candy or stuffed animals or things that little people liked. So and back then, all you were taught was no one's supposed to do this or touch or do that, but they didn't tell you it could come from a relative. So just talking about that and thinking about that, the vulnerability is especially in small children. And so, once they gain your trust and form a bond with you, they cross all kinds of boundaries and swear you to secrecy because we thought it was a game. But anyway, when when they did that, when you look at the when I'm looking at the points, it says that doing this, it allows the groomer to test boundaries of their victim. And it allows them to know how far they can go and manipulate and how far they can coerce you. Testing boundaries can look like telling inappropriate jokes or playing sexualized and invasive games like pantsing, uh, truth or dare, or strip games. And this is usually done in private, and groomers will see how their victims react to them so that they're testing their waters, is what they're doing. And um, they can see if they can continue what they're doing without getting caught.
Yeah, and I thank you, Beverly, for your transparency about that. I know that that was a long time ago, but I thank you for being open about that and sharing it with our viewers and listeners. That even if it happened way a long time ago, it might be something that you need to address or speak up about. And oftentimes, when we think about the movies or we think about the commercials, it's always somebody, some far distant stranger person that you need to worry about. Oftentimes, sadly, it is a family member, like
Hmm.
Beverly said. It oftentimes is a family member, sometimes somebody that you should be able to trust. But it's really important when it comes to any abuse. Oftentimes, those boundaries are blurred. Oftentimes, those boundaries are tested. So it's really important, I'm not telling anybody how to raise their children. I don't got any children yet, but but it's really important to have boundaries with your children in any type of
Hmm.
relationship and stick to those boundaries. And it's important for your children to have boundaries, even if they're very young. It's important that that they have those boundaries, and it's okay to have boundaries with your parents. It's okay to have boundaries, with the friends. If they don't want to hug somebody, hey,
Hmm.
maybe they shouldn't hug that person even if the person's nice. People need to respect those boundaries. And if this person is a good person, if this person is what they say they are, they will respect those boundaries. And it's oftentimes, that we need to even set boundaries with our clients. We got to set boundaries with coworkers. Sometimes you got to, even with superiors. Hey, there's certain lines that you can't cross, and those are relationships that you can build on. Those relationships that have those boundaries and respect your boundaries, those relationships, you can actually go somewhere because you can trust that person, that they're not going to cross those boundaries.
Hmm.
Really important, even in a marriage. Even in a marriage.
Okay, David, right. And groomers tend to use intimidation to keep their victims from telling someone else about the abusive behavior. And again, they test the victim's reactions and trying to see how they will react to being blamed for something super simple, like they tell them, "Who's gonna believe you?" Or this continues until the victim would feel guilty or scared that reaching out to a trusted person who can help no longer crosses their mind. So, as I read this, it's just like I'm just reading this, but in my mind the reality is coming out, the intimidation, and it was a fact. Like, who's gonna believe you? Nobody's gonna believe you. And that person puts the groomer tries to put it in the child's mind that you're a child. No one's gonna believe what you're saying over what I'm saying as the adult, and so it is important that as parents or guardians that we or you learn how to teach and educate your child or young person about grooming and teaching them about what part at a young age what parts of their bodies are private, using the appropriate terminology, all that Google Gaga and no, really. We try to find little cute terms. No, you need to use the real terminology and teach them at a young age so that it's not a game to them and that they know the importance of protecting their boundaries. And kids need to be taught that their private parts should not be a topic of discussion or seen unless it's in the context of things like a doctor's visit. And like you alluded to earlier in your conversation, David, doesn't matter if it's the parent. Even in a marriage, boundaries need to be taught and they need to be respected and they need to be kept.
Yeah, and I, thank you for reiterating that. Those were really good points. I would also say that, sometimes, it's sometimes our job to also, reassess ourselves because sometimes that's hard. Sometimes when kids, you're like, oh, I don't got to listen to them. They're a little kid or whatever.
Hmm.
Even my wife had to correct me on my little niece. Like I would, she'd say stop and we're playing, but I'm like, oh, it's just, a little play. If they say stop, take it as that. Or if they don't want to hug, take it as that. You don't, even if you have good intentions, I think that is really important. Even if you're playing around and you have good intentions and there's nothing, whatever, you need to also respect when the kid's like, okay, stop. That's enough. And it's okay to, be told that, because sometimes, hey, we need to check ourselves. Even though we don't have bad intentions, we don't want somebody that does have bad intentions, you know, that thinking that when I say stop, it doesn't mean anything.
Hmm.
We want them, we want to respect our children, our, nieces or whoever, or spouses, boundaries. It's really important.
It is. And, parents or guardians or whatever, and teaching children, you need to teach them about red flags, with groomers. You need to teach them what red flags to look for. You need to teach them verbiage, language, things to listen for, and share some phrases that groomers may use. And it's worthwhile educating oneself when you have children, or in your case, you don't have children, but you have nieces. You have nephews, little people, and even teenagers. Make a list of trusted adults that you know well, that can support the child if they need to tell someone about a potential groomer. Need to be able to gain the trust of that child so they, even when a person tells them no one's going to believe you or this is a game, let's not tell anyone. That's a red flag right there for an adult telling a child. don't tell anyone, and children need to understand if they are being violated, that it is never their fault,
Yeah.
ever, you
Ev
know, ever, right? So that needs to be emphasized to the child. And it also needs to be emphasized that I support you. If you come to me and you tell me, I support you. So, like you said, David, when a child is saying stop, you need to listen because actually or obviously, if a child is saying stop or whatever, there's some boundaries being crossed, or they're pushed to a point of uncomfortability, even if it's nothing even if there's nothing going on sexual or deviant. If a child says, I don't want to be tickled, stop, then stop, right? So I don't
Yeah.
know. I think some things, uh, again, to look at is teaching the red flags. And there's a difference between a friend telling a child an embarrassing story and keeping it a secret than someone violating boundaries and making them uncomfortable and keeping it a secret. So,
Yeah, and that bleeds into, I'm not gonna go fully into it, but that bleeds into having healthy relationships.
hmm
A good sign of a healthy relationship is having, set boundaries and that person will not cross them. You know that you can trust that person. Hey, if you bring it up, they'll be like, all right, I'm not doing that again. Or, thank you for bringing that up. And that line is never crossed again. So that's,
right?
very important. Setting those boundaries and then respecting those boundaries. And again, when it comes to, specifically a child and adult relationship, we also, even if we're adults and we do know more, oftentimes it's important to, also check yourself and be like, hey, this child is telling me something. It's important to believe them. It's important to, hate and let them set boundaries for themselves as well.
hmm So, here's something that is interesting from the Chicago Tribune. And I'm just going to read just a little bit of this. It says, how does this affect grooming? How does this affect the Black community? And it says, Black girls are sexualized from a young age, sometimes even before they are born. Oftentimes in the Black community, Black girls are policed and blamed for the way that others view them. We are already viewed as promiscuous. So when grooming happens, it can easily be brushed off as, oh, she wanted an older man, or she probably is using him for something, things like that. And in reality, Black girls are vulnerable to grooming because groomers know that they can get away with grooming a Black girl because of our reputation and how we can be treated by our community. I think that's so interesting because as a child, um, um, so I'm just going to say it. My parents trusted their tax the guy that did their taxes for their business. And so as kids, we had to take drop the package over p- um, of the tax papers to their tax guy. And he always touched inappropriately, but would be like, oops, I didn't mean to do that. But, as a kid, you're not thinking of that like 8, 9 years old, 10. And I came from a very small community. And so, yeah, unfortunately, the parents were trusting of white folks, and they were the ones that really were doing it. And that's what this is saying, because the groomer is like, looking at the little black girls and um it's like, "Oh, she's a little black girl," and what they said, I can remember in my head is when they were talking about little girls, "Oh, she's a fast tail, and she's this and she's that," but so they didn't believe the cousins when they were saying or believe us when we were saying, "Mr. So and so keeps doing this and that when I go, and, oh, he doesn't mean anything," but yeah, they did mean it, and they were doing it. And so I think back when we did a segment with trafficking, and I remember that one of the questions asked was, why do policemen traffic young black girls when they have daughters? And they said they go after young ladies that don't look anything like their daughters. So it's brown and black girls. So I just thought that that was interesting, and I can attest to the fact that because of the way society looks at um, young black girls and the way they were depicted, I don't know anything about outside of my community. I do know within my community it happened a lot, and it was because of how the parents were. And that saying, what goes on in the house stays in the house, and sometimes they knew that it was coming from a family member. They knew, but they didn't call that behavior out. So I look at this today, and there's more awareness and more education. And I just prompt and hope that parents listen to their children and that they can hear them. And I'd like to think that kids are not just making up something against an adult, and that you would listen and err on the side of caution.
Yeah, and even if the parents are not even, the ones doing, these uh, grooming things to their children. Oftentimes, if they don't believe them, it's, another abusive relationship, because they look up to the parents, they look up to the guardian to support them, and they're getting no help. And there's obvious, and, just because of that, they're in opposition of the child. So you're just supporting the other person, and you're empowering um, the parent, not your, but the parent or whoever in the situation is empowering, the abuser when they don't believe their child. Um,
Exactly.
so it makes the child feel more helpless. So again, it is very important to believe when a child says something, to validate them.
Exactly, David. And, one last point is, how do we relate grooming to DV? Or how does it affect survivors? Groomers have the intention of exploiting their victims, which is abuse, no doubt. And you don't have to be a child or even a young person to experience grooming. It can happen to anyone. It's about power and control. This goes for survivors as well, especially if a groomer knows you are a survivor. They might attempt to be even more strategic in how they groom you. So just be aware. And if you are worried, don't forget that you can always go to someone that you trust, that can give you insight, advice, or support, or just a listening ear. But never shrug it off, because probably if you think that your boundaries are being crossed, more than likely they
Yeah.
are. I think this was a good segment, David, and I just want to close with a short reminder that, again, we are our sister's house, and we advocate for domestic violence survivors and victims. If you suspect or know someone or suspect that someone is being abused, contact our sister's house at 253-383-4275, or go to our website and check us out at oursistershouse.com. And remember, check out our website and listen up and watch out for more details on our holiday event coming up. Thanks for joining us at Confabulation, and have a good weekend. Peace.
A note from the producer. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. And if you find the conversations held here on Confabulation interesting, please make sure to give us a follow on whatever podcast streaming platform you're tuning in on, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, feel free to expand on these conversations in our comment section below the YouTube videos posted on our channel. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.